Good morning, Mzansi, and welcome to day 6 of the lockdown. I hope everybody's doing well and not bouncing off the walls yet. And I hope everyone's taking care of themselves, taking care of their mental state and their health and their wellness. Today we are joined by none other than Mark Abel, who is the Chief Executive Officer of M&C Saatchi Abel. Now, this is one phenomenal company and one phenomenal human being. He's been in the industry for the last 30 decades. We've got some of the most amazing clients. He's led some of the largest advertising agencies in the world, both here in South Africa and abroad. And yes, so tell us, Mark, how are you doing today?
It's great to be on your show, Jared. Always a little bit skeptical about being on an interview on April Fool's Day. So ready and alert for any pranks you may have in mind. The first one being that you said I've been in this industry for 30 decades, which would make me 300 years old. So I need to correct you on that one. A little bit younger, and I've got a lot of gray hair, but a bit younger than 300. And what would that make me? 327.
Well, Mark, you're looking great. Sorry about that. So listen. I mean, I don't think we need any April Fools. I think we're living in a interesting time as it is. So I think we'll leave the April Fools jokes for next year. I think it's going to be better.
Okay, appreciate that.
Mark, just tell us a little bit about how things are going for you. I mean, you've been self-isolating for some time now, prior to the lockdown. Just tell us how it's been for you.
Yeah. So I had to go to a global strategy meeting in London about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And at the time that I left, there were 7 reported cases in the UK in total. So I thought that the risks of going were pretty low. And then while I was there, obviously wiping and swiping everything in sight with alcohol swabs and everything. And but there didn't seem to be a heightened level of COVID at all. And then after that, I went skiing for a while with my oldest son, who's 19, and then it started to gain momentum. And we looked at the situation and we called the trip early, came home soon, and that was probably the wisest thing that we could have done, because this thing hit Europe, UK, Switzerland like a tsunami, literally within a couple of days. So when I got back here, I was back for a couple of days, and then the protocol became to self-isolate. And so I was in a self-isolating period and literally got back to work for 2 days before having to go back into isolation. So by the time I finish, I will have done 35 days in quarantine, if you like, or self-isolation, a bit of a combo deal in this instance. And it's it's a hell of a thing, I guess, because it's unprecedented times. You know, none of us have got anything to draw on in terms of how we look at the situation. You know, I was saying to my dad, who's turning 85 this year, to an extent, obviously knowing the answer a little bit myself, but I said to my dad, have you ever experienced anything remotely like this in your lifetime? And he said, no, this is uncharted territory. So very unusual. I'm a positive man, always have been. And so I will do my best to stay upbeat and to stay optimistic, but obviously completely aware of the situation of others. And not everybody is fortunate, I guess, to have the space around them, like a number of us have, in order to be able to get out, to walk in the garden, to experience the world still, albeit from a distance, to have the tech to do it. So I think it's going to be brutally difficult for a huge amount of our society, who are going to find the next few weeks terrifying in terms of income and terrifying in terms of the tight space within which they find themselves.
Absolutely. Just touching on the UK, I've got a couple of friends in London, and I was talking to them yesterday. And while I was talking to them, they were out jogging along the streets, and they're in lockdown. So this is it's quite strange to see the way that they are handling this lockdown, and in terms of how South Africa is handling it. I mean, what are your views there? I would have to say that the measures that we've taken have been quite aggressive, but certainly we're taking it very seriously as a country. What are your thoughts there, Mike?
Yeah. So I think that the UK also, not only do we have a lot of business colleagues there, but I've got a number of friends, and talking to them, it does seem like a very soft lockdown. So similar experiences of friends going for jogs, friends cycling every day, being out in Richmond Park, whatever it might be. And I think that we can be very grateful that President Ramaphosa has taken such drastic action in terms of trying to flatten the curve, as they say, and prolong or delay this thing. So, look, I mean, if you look at the UK, it's quite bizarre in a way that both the Prime Minister and heir to the British throne have coronavirus right now. You know, I think that's quite telling. And I don't think that the UK have clamped down on this as hard as they could have or should have, is my view. But then we also have an extremely vulnerable population here, because we have, millions of immunocompromised citizens of South Africa, be it through poverty, be it through HIV-related concerns, or be it through tuberculosis. So I think that President Ramaphosa was 100% correct in having no margin for error whatsoever. I think that Zweli Mkhize, our health minister, has done an outstanding job, as have most of the government members. I guess my only concern really at times like this is for the police, and particularly for the military, to show compassion and restraint. I know it's not an easy thing, because rightfully they have been deployed, and I support the deployment, because you do need to maintain law and order, but also to absolutely respect the rights of our civilians, which by and large they are doing, because the incidents so far have been very small, albeit unfortunate where they have occurred. But I'm certainly hoping that that decision proves to be a wise and compassionate one, and that over the coming weeks we don't see that exacerbate. That does worry me a little bit, but I have nothing but praise for our government in terms of the way they've acted swiftly.
I have to agree with you, Mark. I think they've done incredibly well, given the time frame that they had in order to put this whole thing together. That's been the most amazing thing for me, is to see how quickly we've acted as the human race, or particularly as a nation in South Africa, to come together and to try and either get in front of this, or to implement steps and measures to try and curb this thing. I was speaking to Mark Smopanyana, who's going to be joining us on the show in the coming days, and it was just interesting to get his mindset on this whole thing, which we'll unpack a bit later. But he was just saying to us, it's not a simple case when we're looking at the population that we have in South Africa that's got these huge challenges. Number one, a lot of people, we saw a lot of people going out and panic buying. I mean, that's just not an option for people that don't have a lot of money, that are living in very challenging circumstances. And his view is sort of torn in between these two things. Like, yes, we must be the population must be obeying the military and listening to the military, and they've been deployed for a good reason. And when the military gets called out, the reality is that they're there to enforce the president's orders. But we also need to be cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of people in South Africa that just don't have money, and the little bit of money they have, they then take that money, go to the shops, get themselves something to eat. There are hundreds of thousands of people sitting in that situation, and they just don't have the resources and the tools that they need. So we've really got to exercise a level of compassion and understanding, and take ourselves out of the situation that we might be in, and look at the situation from other perspective. It's a really challenging time for our nation.
It really is. I mean, I think that because we acted so quickly, we have made some decisions that I think should be reversed over the coming days. So, for example, right now, takeaways and restaurants can't deliver food. Now, I think that is a strategic mistake on behalf of government, because by delivering food to people's homes, you are thinning the herd, if you like, of number of people that go to the shops. That in itself will bring down the number of shoppers every single day. There are also a lot of people that are elderly, that are immunocompromised, that can't leave the house simply because of the risk it poses to their health to go shopping. Now, if they could be using a food delivery business and be ordering food, that would help enormously. It would also help those restaurants survive something like this. It would help the staff, the tens of thousands of staff that work across our country in the hospitality industry in those restaurants. And it would help the drivers for those restaurants and it would help the entire supply chain to those restaurants. So I think that because the government has acted quickly, which is highly commendable, I don't think that they can't learn as we go along this path and look at certain things and say, what can we do to change it, to shift, to fine tune, to tweak, and to make it easier. I was talking to my partners. We have an exco meeting 3 times a week, on an hour on a Tuesday, a Thursday, and then a longer one on a Friday. And I was saying, I was just thinking about, I take my car down to the point center in Sea Point to be washed once a week, very specifically there, so that the guys who I know can wash my car and earn money. So I've deliberately, when I travel once a week to Johannesburg, I very deliberately go to Leary's Shoe Shine so that those guys can shine my shoes, and, you give them a generous tip, and that's how they get by. Now, if you are one of those people who is washing a car, or one of those people who is shining shoes, you have absolutely no income whatsoever. And there's no financial give, because a lot of these people have no earnings or savings whatsoever. So I agree with you, Jared. I think that people need to understand that the impact on some people of this isolation is unbelievable, because literally, where will they get their next meal from?
I had an interview yesterday with the director of Backer Buddy, and it's very admirable, the fund that's been put in place, and we've had some fantastic aid and assistance from the international community, as well as some of our listed companies and wealthier families here in South Africa. But the challenge that I see with this fund is that you would have to have some sort of a registered business in order to have any hopes of accessing that fund. And we know in South Africa, the informal trade makes almost 80 billion a year here, which is it's a huge number that of people that are earning, and they're living hand to mouth every single day. And there just doesn't seem to be any way for us to be able to address that and to sort that out. And I'm trying to rack my brain in terms of how we would go about setting up some sort of a fund that people would have access to in that regard. And that is a huge challenge for us. It's a major concern.
Yeah. Well, I think that there are fortunately a number of NGOs and NPOs that have jumped in and are trying to distribute food. One of the people we've got involved in is a delivering cans to schools initiative for school children that would ordinarily have got food, which has been run by a guy called Brad Stern and his company Superiate. And they're a marketing company working exclusively with school marketing opportunities. And so they've done something, and they've got a lot of really influential people on board. I even saw the other day that Francois Pinard got behind this thing. So that's one of the things that I'm aware of that's happening. And then there are a number of different things. A friend of mine, Gidon Novik, has got a food bus that, can't remember the exact name, something Harvest, that delivers a lot of food to needy families, particularly in poor areas. So I've seen quite a lot of people are doing different initiatives. And then even if I look at my own company, what we've done is we've set up something called an emergency fund, which is not just for my staff members who continue, thankfully, to earn their salaries, but for their family members who, they might have parents who no longer can have a job that brings in money, or might have siblings. And so it's really there for emergency medical supplies or for food. And we've done that specifically being wary of the fact that if they don't get some support from us, and if they find themselves desperate, where indeed do they get support or help from? So I think there are quite a lot of people. If you look at the Solidarity Fund that President Ramaphosa announced, that's under the leadership of Gloria Sorobi and Adi Enthoven. I think something like that, as you mentioned, a number of those philanthropic families, whether it's the Motsepis or the Oppenheimers or the Ruperts, who have each donated R1 billion. Nasper Sassi has donated R1 billion. And then I know there are many, many families that have donated tens or hundreds of millions to this thing. And an allocation of that to help people. But I know that a lot of religious groups, if I look at our synagogue just in Sea Point, but if you look at the churches and the mosques, the Gift of the Givers, the Hindu community, there are a lot of different communities out there right now that have seized the nettle and are trying to deliver food. So one of the things I was thinking about, Jared, is actually using our street store after the isolation is over to once again host that nationally and to distribute food, essentials, and obviously clothing as always to the nation. I think that's a very easy way for people to get behind something like this themselves and to host a street store and to distribute essentials, because I think people are going to literally be threadbare by the time this is over.
Mark, I'm glad that you mentioned street store because I wanted to just unpack that a little bit more with you today. Can you just tell our viewers a little bit more about the street store initiative, how it started and the sort of reach that it got and the purpose that it serves?
Sure. So about, what is it now, 5 years ago, I reckon, maybe 6 years ago, two of our creative people in our creative department at the Cape Town agency noticed that a lot of the homeless people in the area were wearing very thin, old, broken clothing, threadbare clothing, really. And obviously, it was round about March, and we realized, much like the Game of Thrones, that winter was coming. And so it was a worry for us that, you know, what would happen to these people if they didn't have warm clothing. And so this young guy, a guy called Max Pitzak, came up with this idea of what about having a rent-free, premises-free, free pop-up clothing store for the homeless. And he went to talk to our executive creative director at the time, Gordon Ray, and said to Gordy, what do you think of this idea? And Gordy looked at it and he absolutely loved it. And he called me and he said, Mike, come into my office and have a look at this idea. And I went in with the MD of the company, Jason Harrison, and we looked at this idea. Max had a very talented copywriter working with him called Kaylee Leviton. There was a very passionate account management person, Fahim Chowdhury, and we all jumped in and got around this idea as an agency. And we thought, let's invest heavily behind it. Let's refine this idea. Let's strip it down to something very powerful and very brutally effective. And so we launched the street store, which literally is made up of 4 posters. The listeners or viewers rather can go on to thestreetstore.org and see a lot more about it, or you can go onto YouTube and watch the street store videos to see what it's about. And so we hosted it outside the Salesian Institute, the very first one, in about 2014, I reckon, or 2015. And it captured the imagination of not just the nation, but the world. And very soon, once every 3 days, a street store started happening somewhere in the world. And you would see them happening in Bogota, in Kathmandu, in the most far-flung cities in the world, Cincinnati, or, you know, just unbelievable wherever you would see this thing popping up. And then Bono's one organization got behind the idea, and the Huffington Post globally, and we did TED Talks, and the thing just exploded. And so basically we've now clothed hundreds of thousands of people across the world. Over the next couple of months, we're heading to our 1,000th street store that has happened globally. We plan to turn that into a big national, if not global event. But it really does talk, Jared, to the humanity of people, because what the street store does is it gives dignity not just to homeless people, but to the haves as well. You know, my wife has worked at a number of street stores with me, and every time she leaves the street store after working there for a day, even with my 12-year-old son working there, she says to me, I think I got more out of today than the homeless people did, because it's an incredibly rewarding and enriching experience. You know, people have got misconceptions about the homeless people. Our experiences, by and large, is that they have been unbelievably polite in queuing for their shopping experience. Each homeless person is entitled to take 3 items of clothing. Sometimes you see them take a shirt, pants, and a pair of shoes, and they'll walk out with a new outfit. I mean, we've once had this young man who arrived there, and he'd been out of work for a long time, and he looked very disheveled, and he said, I'm going for an interview this afternoon. What can you help me with? and the guys found him a suit, and they found him a shirt, and they found him a beautiful pair of shoes. And he walked away, looking $1 million, and he was like 2 feet taller. You just felt like it had lifted his, and I just wish he had come back and told us if he got that job or if he didn't. And if he's out there watching today and hopefully a successful man, I hope he did get that job. And now what we've done is we've taken the street store into hotels. So we came up with this terrific idea that when people travel, it's an opportunity for them to bring an item of clothing with them out of their cupboard, and to leave it in the hotel room. So if you look at one of the hotels that we have on board, which is the Home Suite Hotel Group, and in Johannesburg, if you open the wardrobe, you'll see there's a hanger in there that is a street store hanger, and encourages you to leave some jeans or a shirt or whatever it might be. So when you book into the hotel, they send you an email and they say to you, because people traditionally travel with their nice stuff, not their old stuff, but there's an email that encourages you to look in your cupboard and bring an item or few of clothing. And we are hoping that big global hotel groups like the Marriott and those types of the Radisson get on board with this, because it's an idea really to clothe homeless people around the world, and it literally costs those hotels absolutely nothing to implement it.
What an amazing initiative, Mark. The more you speak and the more we start hearing about these things that you've been involved in, I get this deep sense of purpose from you. And, I think we can go through our lives wanting to be millionaires, wanting to build big companies, wanting to have all the luxuries in life. But if your life isn't filled with some level of purpose, and that purpose has got to be around, it's the service of others. And I'm just picking up an incredible amount of willingness to serve other people, Mark. And I've just got to tell you, it's incredibly admirable. And I hope that your street stores expand to thousands and thousands and thousands, because we need more initiatives like this. Mark, the one thing that I've noted during this entire process and this lockdown period is that as humanity, it really feels as though we are coming together to serve, because there isn't much else that we can do now. And all differences aside, whether it be political views, whether it be competitiveness in the open market, in the free market, there really seems to be a culmination of people just sort of rallying together to try and do just that, to serve. I mean, what are your views on the mental state of people at this stage? People that are doing this, coming together to try and give and sort of minimize the impact.
Yeah, I think that it's certainly a great leveler. There are very few things that happen in life that get people to understand that we are one people, that we're a common humanity, and that whether you have billions of dollars in the bank or you have absolutely nothing, you are not immune from COVID. And Mother Nature has that ability. If you were on one of those beaches, or in Thailand when the tsunami came in, whether you were serving staff, serving guests drinks at the pool, or whether you were somebody who had a private villa on the beach, you were treated equally by Mother Nature. So, man does put these silly little things in place to denote hierarchy or ego or supremacy or whatever those idiotic things might be. And something like this reminds us of our common humanity and our frailty. And then I think in looking at that, in recognizing that we are all in this together, a number of companies have jumped on board and said, what can we do? Let's drop the ego, let's drop the bull, and let's rally together to get behind us. And what I'm delighted to see is how the government, locally and internationally, is going to be clamping down on people who treat this opportunistically. Obviously, we've all read the stories about the people who are importing masks and bringing them in and marking them up by 1,000% and whatever that might be. And, I think that talks to an extreme level of evil and vulgarity to look at this moment as one to make profit. I'm even hoping at the time that, please God, they find a vaccine for this thing, that is made freely available, whether it's through the World Health Organization, through governments, through philanthropists. But again, something like that is not an opportunity to make money. It's an opportunity to serve humanity. So I've been very impressed. Look, I haven't seen many people drop prices or try and drop margins to make things more affordable, and I think that might be something that certain people might want to look at, because obviously, there might be certain essential items where there is just no give and there is just no money, and you just know that people need to be able to get their hands on, those items. Or maybe some people will sponsor some of the big retailers in people buying those items, whether it's the staples I'm talking about specifically, just to ease the burden a little bit. The other thing, I guess, is we can't become a nanny state. So we can't police people insofar as what they consume. I'm not a smoker. In fact, I find smoking reprehensible. I think it's terrible that one can sell a carcinogenic product in and of itself. But if people smoke today, it's well written across that whole pack that it has got numerous ills for your health and those around you. But if people want to buy cigarettes, people should be able to buy cigarettes. And I'm pleased that they reversed the decision around that. Alcohol is one of the things that I would have looked at similarly. However, there are extreme social ills that can come through alcohol consumption. So it's probably a wise idea to have kept alcohol away at times like this, because I think people do need their wits about them. I think people do need their composure. But I think there's always that fine balance between being a nanny state, being paternalistic, being authoritarian, if you like, or just aiding citizens to get by. So I think there are a lot of things that we're learning out of this thing. And yes, I am delighted to see commonality of purpose in how certain companies that may ordinarily compete are pulling together. And then the question is, so what is the benefit of that? In pulling together, what is the added value that you are bringing to South Africans to ease the burden a little bit?
Right, to our viewers who have just tuned in, I'm talking to Mike Abel, the CEO of M&C Saatchi Abel. And we're just having a wonderful conversation. I mean, there's so many things that are going on, and there's so many good practices that are currently coming out of this whole process. Mark, the one thing I wanted to speak to you about is how M&C Saatchi is navigating their way through this. I mean, how are you guys navigating through this as a business? This must be quite challenging for you.
It most certainly is, Jared, and I don't think that any of us, no matter how prepared we are for any sort of eventuality that might call for remote working, it does put a major strain on the system, and it calls for a lot of discipline and a lot of focus and a lot of commitment from everybody in the organization. And I'm delighted that our people have absolutely rallied behind this thing and are deeply committed to making it work via remote working. So to explain to the viewers around this M&C Saatchi Abel and the M&C Saatchi Group in South Africa, we are a diversified group of marketing and advertising companies. So we will have companies that specialize in events, activations, sports sponsorships. We'll have a company that specializes in PR, in marketing, consulting, digital, a whole range of different companies, 8 different companies in the group. And it becomes more difficult for certain of those companies to operate as they would ordinarily do. So for example, if you are our events and activations company in sports marketing, it becomes very tricky because obviously content is the big thing that comes out of any sports event. What's the backstory? Who are the players? What happened on the field? What happened after the game? And so without the game, it becomes quite tricky. And so for an organization like that, and that company of mine is ours is called Levergy. And they've got a brilliant leadership team. And I was on a talk with them with my exco yesterday, and they're looking at a whole lot of really creative ideas of developing and delivering content and continuing to deliver to people's sports passions. But it's very difficult outside of events in and of themselves. But it forces you to think creatively and to dig deep. So what we've done is we developed remote working systems way before COVID. We thought, we've got a lot of very important big blue chip clients in our group, and we needed a situation if heaven forbid our building burnt down. how would we continue operating? So literally all of our files, everything is downloaded remotely every single day. So all of the information, if our building had to burn down, does not live on the servers only in our building. It does live remotely outside of the agency, which is incredibly important and reassuring for our clients. And then we have a lot of people that freelance or work from home. And, over the years, we've learned. So the whole agency, all 350 of our people are still working full time, but from home. So, it's obviously changed in terms of, they're probably walking around with fancy lounge shirts and in their undies, in terms of appearing, on the video and looking very professional. But I've got no idea if they wake up just in time to take that call when it comes through. But we are cracking powerful ideas, and we are serving all of our clients exactly as per normal. So our commitment to our clients, obviously what we can't do is a TV shoot, but we can come up with a whole lot of different ideas which can use stock imagery, it can use animation, it can use a whole host of different stuff. Our suppliers have been amazing, so we can still record radio ads online. We can do a whole lot of production online. And so we are working. As one of the guys put, Jason Harrison, who's our group MD, put a poster on the door when we closed the agency in Cape Town and in Joburg, and it said, "Our doors might be closed, but our minds are still open." And I think that's very much our mindset. And when I spoke to all of the staff, because I do that once a week via Microsoft Teams, I talk to all of the people in the group and I share where we are. I said to them that I would love to be sitting at the Loeries next year or at the Cannes Advertising Awards and see some of the most awarded work that we've done being developed over this time of shutdown, because it is a unique opportunity to have limited interruption and to just use your mind to wonder and to think and to imagine and to create. I mean, the most powerful things that have been created in the world, I think it was Einstein who said imagination will take you from A to B, but logic will take you from A to B, but your imagination will take you everywhere. And that's what I'm relying on myself and my people doing and that's what I suggest your viewers today do is use this time as a profound gift to think, to reappraise, to reconsider, to reinvigorate, re-energize. There are many positives for your businesses in terms of new solutions that can come out at a time like this. And the funny thing is that as a group, we've been looking at remote working for quite a while now, because there are a lot of benefits to remote working. There are a lot of people who prefer to freelance, or primary caregivers to young children, or stay-at-home parents, or whatever they would like to be. But you would be too nervous to ever interrupt a very beautiful, very smooth production system to try something new. You know, that old adage is, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. And this has literally forced our company to look at that more seriously and to say, can this style of operating work for us? Is it sustainable? What can we learn out of it? So that's what we are open to seeing.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I had a video interview with Richard Mulholland, who's just a off-the-wall dynamic character, and he was telling us about one of these businesses. There was a gin distillery, and obviously with the ban of alcohol sales and the lack of being able to produce and to distribute, they had to quickly pivot, and they pivoted to a hand sanitizer company. That's what they did, sanitization. So they took all of their product and converted it into something that was going to be far more impactful. So I think what we're seeing out of this whole process is a re-engineering of some processes that might have been old legacy processes that weren't necessarily serving us or won't serve us today, and probably won't serve us tomorrow. Because I think, Mark, that whatever changes we're undergoing at this stage, whatever is coming out of this COVID, I honestly think it's going to impact the way we do everything going forward.
I agree with you. I think that what companies are now being forced to do is to have a look at what do they have and what could they easily plug into their system. So if you are a manufacturer of alcohol, where hand sanitizer, I think is the minimum level of it being effective is 60%, I think it is. Yes, there you've got 60% of your ingredients immediately available, and what can you do with that? My wife Sarah was showing me yesterday that Granadilla, the people who make the costumes, are delivering fruit and veg now in beautiful Granadilla carts. So there are these wonderful carts, cases, full of lovely fruit and veggies, and they're trying to help food companies stay in business and trying to collaborate with them around that. And that, just seeing the marketing brains of those young guys at Granadilla coming together with these fruit and veg companies, and together collaborating and continuing to trade in one way or another, amazing. Yeah, and I think that there are a host of those types of collaborations that we may see come out of this. But as you say, behaviors are fundamentally going to change coming out of something like this. I think that business travel is going to change dramatically. I mean, business travel is a huge expense for a number of companies. I mean, just my company alone, we spend millions of rands a year on local and international travel. And, you know, a lot of us travel weekly to Johannesburg on business from Cape Town, or vice versa. We travel internationally a lot. And I think that people are going to think far more carefully about travel. Is the trip necessary? Can we do it over a Zoom call like we're doing right now? Look, I think nothing can replace, and I really have to say this and stress it, Jared, face-to-face, the human contact is incredibly important. And I think that if people can keep that humanity and that human connection going to an extent via virtual, that is great. But we are social creatures, and we do require people around us physically as well. So I think from a business point of view, moving to a virtual system is not a silver bullet. It's not going to be a panacea for all. It's not going to be a new way of operating in totality, but perhaps at 50%. That might be very interesting, because also, I mean, the benefits of less travel, people spend more of their rands in South Africa than overseas. We've chatted about that in the past. If you have a look at carbon footprint emissions from planes, there could be a very different model that emerges from that. That could be very positive for people and very positive for the planet. And those two things are entirely mutual.
Mark, I just want to thank you very much for your time this morning. And just on a parting note, if you have one message for our listeners and our viewers and for the country, what would that message be? Just one message. What would it be?
Well, I think that we're in a period now of what I think to an extent is sensory deprivation. And what happens with sensory deprivation, because we can't get out, we can't see the sights and the smells and the tastes and everything that we are used to. But what that does is it heightens certain of your senses as well. It makes you more creative. It makes you more aware of your surroundings. And so to use that, this period now, the quiet, the solitude, as an enforced sabbatical, and to use this time to think about your business, to think about your relationships, about your loved ones, and to think of new possibilities and new opportunities for personal growth and for happiness. One of the things I'm doing every day is I'm getting in touch with somebody who means something to me in my life, who I haven't been in touch with for a long time. And this is just a unique opportunity for me to step off the hamster wheel, to slow down a little bit, and to reconnect with people who are meaningful in my life. So that's just one idea that I put out there. Great to chat to you, Jared.
Mark Abel, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Abel from M&C Saatchi. Wonderful to chat to you, and stay positive, Mark. Stay strong. Chat to you soon.
Thank you. You too. And stay healthy, all of you. Take care.
Cheers.